girls opened a lot of doors for me, in that it was really the job that like put me on the map as an actor. And I take it as such a high compliment that like people thought I was her, and we could not be more different. I mean, I write about it in the last essay in the book. People truly believe that I'm Shoshana.
I'm Justin J, and this is The Plug. It's every actor's dream to land that once-in-a-lifetime role, a character so unique and perfectly suited that it feels like no one else could ever play it. But there's a catch. When a performance becomes that iconic, the world sometimes refuses to see you as anything else. That same role that put you on the map can quietly box you in. For today's guest, that role was Shoshana, the fast-talking, delightfully quirky standout from HBO's Girls. Our guest brought the character to life in such a distinct and evocative way that it practically became part of her public identity. At the same time, she had to navigate another shadow in her career, the legacy of her legendary playwright father, David Mamet. His influence loomed large, and like many children of famous parents, she felt the double-edged sword of both privilege and expectation firsthand. In her new book, Does This Make Me Funny?, she opens up about that struggle in a deeply personal way, tackling anxiety, body image, self-worth, and the complexities of growing up in a show business family. So what exactly did Axl Rose steal from her in a nightclub? And how did her love of animals help disarm an internet troll? We'll find out as we sit down for a chat about her latest work, which shines a light on the funny, raw, and heartfelt moments of life in and out of the spotlight. Today, author, actor, and sharp-witted storyteller, Zosia Mamet. Zosia, thanks so much for sitting down to do this.
I'm so excited we finally made this happen.
Finally made it happen. Let's just, I want to get the plug in right away.
Okay.
Your new book, Does This Make Me Funny? I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's a really fun book, and it's a very personal book. And I'm wondering, for a book that's that personal and intimate, what goes through your mind on the eve of the release? Are you nervous? Are you excited? Like, where's your head at when you release a book like this?
I mean, I sort of take, I don't know if you have anxiety, but I have anxiety. And sometimes when I feel really anxious about something, my anxiety, my buddy who actually came up with the title of the book, she calls it, she's like, your anxiety flea is looking for a host when there's like something really big that's happening and it feels like it can't encompass that. So it will just like be anxious about other things. So I found this last week, I was like, why am I feeling so anxious about like random shit? Like obsessing over what socks to pack and being like, not those socks, and then like repacking different socks and switching them back out. And I was like, oh, I think I'm really anxious about basically publishing my diary. That's probably what I'm actually really anxious about.
So you're diverting your anxiety to socks so you can be comfortable doing press for the book.
There. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm excited and also very nervous.
Well, this book is really a lot about you growing up with body issue struggles and being bullied and the residue, as you put it, of having so much self-hatred for so many years. And then you go and choose a career like acting, which is based so much on physical appearance and constant rejection. And, you've also established yourself as a writer now. Can you talk about what pulls you between acting versus writing and how those different paths either like challenge or feed different parts of your personality?
I mean, they're really different. It's funny. Like I wouldn't like necessarily classify myself as a writer, even though I just wrote a book. I feel like writing is something I enjoy doing it. I don't enjoy the editing process. So I think there's something about I mean, being a writer is obviously a much more solitary endeavor. I think I really enjoy telling stories. So, like, getting the story down on paper feels very good to me. But then having to continuously live with my work does not feel good to me. And I'm not precious about edits. Like, I literally, if I could give my work to my editor and be like, do what you want with it, I just never want to see it again. I would probably prefer that. So I find that part of writing to be much more challenging.
Well, how collaborative is that process?
I mean, my editor is amazing. I love her. Meg Letter is incredible. Sally Ware, my manager, basically is my unofficial editor. She actually read everything before I would send it to Meg just to like give it a once over. It's super collaborative, but it's also like the edits come in and then you're just living alone with them. Like I would ask her questions if I had them, but it's really on you. I read a story once, I don't know if it's true or not, that I feel like it was maybe Monet, maybe it was a different artist, used to like be caught in museums trying to alter their work. And I think it's probably an urban myth, but basically this idea that like as artists, if we were given the opportunity, we would just edit in whatever form until someone forced us to stop. And that was the part that I found the hardest, was like there are these sort of like landmarks within the process of editing a book where it gets to the point where they're like, okay, you can change things at this point, but nothing big because the format is essentially set. Or like now you're literally just reading for one final pass and you can't change anything. And then when I read the book as an audiobook, it was like, obviously I can't.
It's done.
It's done. This is what it is. And that part I had a really hard time with. Whereas as an actor, something about it feels a bit more freeing to me because I go and I do my work and then I leave. And like whatever happens beyond that point is out of my control. And I don't see the finished product until normally I go to the premiere. And then there's nothing I can do about it anyways. So it feels, it's like I have less control and yet it somehow feels less anxiety provoking to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you know, you're very honest and candid in this book about sharing some really painful or intimate or sometimes embarrassing stories.
Mm-hmm.
There's a surprising amount of discussion of lady parts in this book,
sure,
which
yeah.
which I found really funny. But I noticed when it comes to people involved in some really disturbing experiences that you had, you're very discreet about their identities. And, you know, there's really very few names in this book that you mentioned. What guided your decision to keep so many people anonymous?
I think I just felt like I wasn't like trying to write a tell-all, you know, I was trying to write about my experience, and my experience obviously involved other people. But I figured people were already going to have a lot of opinions and thoughts and feelings and things to say about what I'd written. And I was like, I don't necessarily want to add that layer of like naming names on top of it. And I thought their part in the story wasn't my story to tell. Like I had to describe them as humans, but I didn't need to like slap an identity, a true identity on them.
I mean, some of them, there was a couple that it was pretty easy to read through the
Sure.
lines of who you're talking about.
Sure.
But I mean, well, so we've had on a lot of authors on the podcast this season. We had on Ione Skye recently, and we had on Larry Charles. They both talked about their books, and both of their books had some very unflattering portrayals of some really famous people. And I asked Larry a similar question of why he chose to include them. And his take was pretty much, as long as he felt that he was being brutally honest and forthcoming about his, you know, mistakes and failures and being self-deprecating, that he felt justified in kind of telling his honest depiction of the story. Do you feel that your role is a little bit different?
Not necessarily. I mean, like you said, like I wrote a lot of embarrassing things about myself, and I'd like to think I was pretty self-deprecating
Absolutely.
in the book. You know, so it wasn't like I was trying to paint myself as this perfect individual and all these other people were like the assholes that got in my way. I think I honestly just like didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So minus a couple humans, like Axl Rose being one of them.
Yeah.
Because not naming him sort of like took a bit of the bite out of the story. Yeah, for the most part, I was like, I just didn't really want to deal with it. And like, to your point, there are a couple of stories where I didn't try to mask that person beyond not naming their name. But I was like, if I sort of stamp my flag in the ground of like this person X that everyone knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like taking it one step further that I think that it was maybe just laziness of like not wanting to handle the backlash of naming someone outright.
Yeah, I mean, I thought your discretion was very classy, but I just was wondering if it was an intentional decision or if it just was something that you didn't want to deal with.
I think it was basically like I didn't want to deal with it. Yeah. But that's very kind you say that. I literally yesterday was debating on the Axl Rose piece that Vulture did the excerpt of. A bunch of people were like trolling in the comments, which I only know because my sweet, sweet husband really wanted to like clap back at one of them and wrote this very thoughtful response. And I was like, this guy does not deserve that. It's like probably sitting in his mom's basement writing this. But then I had a really early flight yesterday, and at like 4 a.m, I'm like sitting in the airport looking at these comments. And I was like, what if I just said really nice things back to all of these people? Like, what if I subverted all of their trolly comments? And this one woman commented like, what was it? It was something like, oh, the trials of a NEPO baby. And I clicked on her page and she writes all these books about rescue animals and like dogs in shelters and what their stories are. And I'm a huge advocate of animal rescue. So I was just like, thank you so much for all of the work you do with rescue animals. It's a cause that's near and dear to me. And I hope you have a really nice day. And she wrote back and she was like, that was a really classy response.
Oh.
And I was like, whoa, did I just disarm a troll?
I mean, I think it's a response is what generally people are looking for.
I think so. I do think you're right. So I think for the most part, not responding is the way to go, but it's so hard because you're like, oh, I can imagine. I just want to say something. Anyways.
There's a really compelling section of your book involving you and Kurt Vonnegut's daughter. And I don't want to go into too many of the details, but the takeaway is very clear. And that is your father, David Mamet, has a very loyal fan base. And I would suspect that a lot of interviews that you do, that the people try and kind of shoehorn questions in there to maybe find a backdoor way of getting an anecdote or getting insight into your dad. And I promise I won't do that. But I do want to get your perspective on what it's like to navigate the industry with that legacy attached to you, especially now that you've got your own body of films and books. I mean, did you ever consider using a more neutral last name?
I did. I contemplated it. I think it's tough though, because like I'd seen a lot of people do that. I was also really young at the time, and like social media wasn't as big of a thing. I mean, like the internet wasn't even what it is now, which like makes me sound so old, but it's true. I got in an argument once with my youngest brother because he didn't believe me that iPhones didn't exist when I was his age. He was like, I don't know, like 11 at the time or something. He was like, you're lying. They've always been around. I was like, they haven't. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But I think there wasn't as much of an example for me to look at of people. I think people do it now all the time.
Yeah.
And it's also, maybe we just see it done more often. But
well, I mean, did you find that having that last name, it acted as kind of both a privilege and a burden in terms of the expectations that might come from it?
1,000%. I mean, I do honestly wonder if it may have been easier if I changed my last name. I think that that's like a very big misconception that people have, is that when you're born to a famous family with a famous last name, it's just like, you know, the gates of heaven open for you, which is absolutely not the case. It wasn't like my dad was writing parts for me and casting me in movies and financing them. Like I started out in the same way. And many times I think, and I read about this in the book, people actually had sort of unrealistic expectations of me, or they had preconceived notions of who I was going to be because of who my father is. And then when I wasn't that, because like my dad's a pretty like dark person, and I absolutely have a dark side, but I think when you meet me, I come off as like a bit more bubblegum. And so it was almost like, because people had this preconceived notion of who I was going to be and what I was going to bring to the table, if I didn't fit into that box, they almost wrote me off as opposed to just like taking what I had to offer.
Like they want somebody, they assumed you're going to be intense and brooding.
Yeah,
and
I
bring
think
that to
so.
the table.
And then when I wasn't, they were sort of like, well, wait, what? And I think it's sort of, that lended itself to oftentimes people not liking me just because I confused them. So it really was a double-edged sword. Like it wasn't always a help starting out.
Well, I mean, you talk really honestly about the label Nepo baby and how you relate to that. And I think that one of the key parts of that equation that people don't really take into account is it's not just the opportunity or the resources that something like that can bring, but it's also the exposure to what's possible at an early age. And, you describe growing up in a family that's in the entertainment business is a bit like being born into the tradition of a circus that you'll eventually be involved in. And because of that, it seems like you had this sense of what your dreams were and what you wanted your trajectory to be at a very early age. And I feel like that alone is such a huge gift that puts you ahead of so many other people in itself. Do you agree with that? Is that a fair statement?
1000%. I mean, I always say like the greatest gift that I think I got being born into an entertainment family was exposure and knowledge. Like I definitely caught the bug early. People ask, and I'm like, I have no idea how to answer this question. If I would have wanted to be an actor, if I was born to, like a family of dentists, and I don't know the answer to that question, but yeah, I got to see it from a very young age, and it made me fall in love with it very early. And I think I also got to see really how the mechanism of the industry worked. So I started out, I was like pretty jaded already. I got to see how brutal it was, how much rejection there was, how a day on set is like not glamorous whatsoever. It's long and it's grueling and it's early mornings and there's a ton of waiting around and often the food is bad. And I really got to witness like how the sausage was made. And I think that definitely helped me a lot. And I think just knowing what I wanted to do,
that's huge.
It was such a gift. I had a lot of friends who went away to college and were like, I don't really feel a pull strongly one way or another. And even though I dealt with a ton of rejection starting out, and it was not easy and it was not pleasant, I felt the pull to want to do this so wholeheartedly. It was like something, it didn't even feel like something I'd chosen. It felt like something that chose me. So I was like, well, even though this sucks, I'm just going to keep going because I don't really have another choice.
Yeah. I mean, do you seek your dad's input on your writing or acting? Is that a challenging dynamic? Do you keep that separate?
Yeah, no, I don't ask him for his opinion at all. I used to have him help me read auditions when I was first starting out, but it ended up getting really tough because he has a very specific way of directing. He has a very specific, my dad's like he's an auteur. Like he's
a one of one. His dialogue, his direction. It's David Mamet.
It's David Mamet. And like, I think he directs things that he's written. So the way his cadence, the way he likes things, it's holistic, right? So when I would be reading for like a WB sitcom and he was trying to direct me, I like knew in my heart that what he was telling me to do was not what that casting director wanted, but was what he thought like elevated this writing. And I just was like, I just think this is it's sort of like trying to put ketchup on like a ruined pasta sauce. It was like, this is just not, one of these things is not like the other. So I ended up just being like, you know what? I think we're just going to keep these things separate. And when it came to writing, no one read anything. I asked for no one's input except for Sally and my editor, not even my husband.
Wow.
He wasn't allowed to read it till it was done because I was too terrified of his opinion.
Well, in the book, you quote your dad as saying that the most powerful thing you can do in Hollywood is say the word no.
Mm-hmm.
And you describe a lot of incidents in this book where you really did that. You did the hard thing. I mean, you went against the grain and you fired your agent, and you caught a lot of blowback from that. And you quit a TV show because the showrunner was, being really abusive and disrespectful. You also share some really disturbing personal situations where you were maybe taken advantage of and you weren't able to really assert yourself in the same way.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, why do you think that you found it easier to say no professionally than personally?
It's a really good question. I think I've always, like I said, I've always had a lot of insecurity. I've always struggled with self-worth issues. And I think for some reason, when it comes to work, it's almost like myself as an actor is like playing a character. I was talking to my therapist a couple weeks ago about being nervous about the book coming out. And she was like, you're going to be fine. When you have to go to work, she was like, I've seen you very much not okay and go to work and be fine. My dad calls it Dr. Theater. It's like this old wives' tale about the theater that you can be literally at death's door so sick, but you don't have an understudy and it's opening night and it's the chance of a lifetime on Broadway. And from the moment that the curtain goes up, you will walk on that stage. You will be absolutely fine until you walk off stage and you will just you will dissolve into a puddle of illness because Dr. Theater takes care of you while you're on stage. And I think that's kind of it. It's some other part of me turns on when it comes to work. And I think it makes me a bit more confident and assertive and sort of, this sounds so cheesy, but I don't know a better way to say it, step into my power a little bit more. But when it comes to me, Zosia, in my personal life, I think when I was younger, for some reason, that ability didn't translate to that. And I kind of was more of a passenger. And so I let things happen to me that I maybe wouldn't have in a professional setting.
So when you're asserting yourself, even as yourself, but regarding your profession of acting, it's almost as if you're kind of acting on behalf of yourself, or it's not as personal.
Maybe, yeah.
If you rather than me, Zosia, making this decision on a personal level, it's me, Zosia, making this decision about my career, about this other entity of myself.
Yeah, it was almost I don't know, I matured faster in that regard. I was just able to advocate for myself better in one lane of my life as opposed to across the board.
Has that changed?
I mean, I'd like to think so. Yeah, I've worked hard at it. I mean, it's a journey, right?
Yeah. There's another great story in the book where you came downstairs on Christmas morning and you saw your mom putting presents under the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And you confronted her point blank, and she basically looked at you in the eyes and lied and said, of course Santa Claus is real. And I've always thought that the tradition of Santa Claus is so peculiar to begin with, because it's basically this big lie that you tell your kids. And I don't know many parents who ever actively sit their kids down and tell them that Santa Claus is real. They basically perpetuate it until the kid realizes that they've been lied to all this time.
Sure.
And, it's definitely in the objective is to foster a sense of magic and wonder, but it also just sets this really weird precedent of, being trustworthy and honest with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why all these years later, you chose to put that story in the book. Did you see your mother differently after that incident? Or as an adult now, do you have a different perspective in terms of the paradox of lying to somebody for their own good?
It's so tough, right? I think sometimes a lie can actually be the most compassionate thing to tell someone, which seems strange, but I think there are times when that is the case. And I think that's a really tricky one. I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but it seems both cruel to bring a child up being like Santa's not real, and also to your point, cruel to like perpetuate this absolute falsehood until one day you fully shatter your child's heart. And like, what was the point? But it really upset me it really did upset me because in that moment, wholeheartedly meant what I was saying, which was like, please tell me the truth. I want to know. And when my mom just straight up lied to me, I was like, okay, I gave her the opportunity and she told me, so he must be real.
Is it one of the situations where, the proverbial cover up is more painful than the crime?
I think so. Like, I do. And I wrote about it, I really wanted to write about my escapist tendencies as a child. And I think like now as a human being, when you experience trauma young, obviously like you don't have the tools yet to process what that means and how to overcome it. And so we look for tools in which to do that as a child. And mine was like finding a solace in magic and escapism. So that's really what that essay is about. That's just like the example that I sort of couched it in. Because it was obviously something I still hold a grudge about. But at the time, it didn't necessarily change how I saw my mom. But it is, yeah, it's something that I've struggled with. And it's funny because I'm a super, super sensitive person. And my husband is someone who values honesty above all else. Like, he will not tell me something's good. He won't tell me I look good in something. He won't tell me everything's going to be okay if he doesn't believe that. And when we first got together, it was a really tough learning curve for me because I just wanted him to take care of me in those moments. And I came to learn, he was like, but that is me taking care of you because I will never lie to you. And it's come to be one of the things I appreciate most about him in the long list of things I appreciate because he's an incredible man. Because I know I can trust him implicitly. And when he tells me like, you look beautiful in that. You were incredible in that performance. I read your book. It's fucking amazing. I can believe him. There is never part of me that questions his honesty because I know that he would not tell me unless he meant it. And looking back on all the people that sort of lied and manipulated me in my life, I'm like, oh, wow, I ended up like with a partner who actually was the perfect fit, even though it was something I had to accustom myself to. It now has become something that makes me feel so safe because I never question anything he says.
So you had to kind of recalibrate fishing for compliments in the form of a question.
1000%. Yeah.
So a lot of actors describe their breakout roles as both a blessing and sometimes this shadow that hangs over them. And, being part of such a hugely successful and influential show like Girls and playing such a distinctive character like Shoshana, I'm curious what that experience is like once the show ended. Like, did you find that it was generally a net positive experience in terms of the doors and the opportunities that you got as a result? Or did you really find it a challenge to get people to see you more than just that one character?
It's not black and white. It definitely is more nuanced than that. I mean, I would say on the one hand, Girls opened a lot of doors for me in that like it was really the job that like put me on the map as an actor. And I think I learned so much on that show. It was really like, that was the beginning of my career. I mean, I worked a good amount up until then, but I spent my 20s on that show. And like so much of that job was scripts were changing on the fly. Writers were always on set. We were getting pitched new lines. We were improvising, and it taught me to be like very agile. It really made me fall in love with improv. It sort of formed who I was as an actor. But at the same time, it was also the show that really introduced me and to the world and put me on the map as an actor. And I take it as such a high compliment that like people thought I was her, but people thought I was her. And we could not be more different. I mean, I write about it in the last essay in the book that I write about how much I miss her and my experience playing her, and that people truly believe that I'm Shoshana. And
I mean, that's like a compliment, but also a curse as well to a degree, no?
1000%. Because it's like we're true intrinsic opposites. And so I think it did put me in a bit of a box. And our industry is so funny. I always say that like sometimes casting directors and producers are kind of like goldfish. Like their memory is so short. And even people who like know me and have seen previous work, it's almost like they forgot that I'm different than her and that I can do anything other than that role.
Well, where did that character come from? And was that character on the page that much, or did you channeled her despite the fact that she's so different from who you really are?
I think so. I mean, I literally read this in the essay. Like, I don't know if she was like a past life. Like, I've never had an experience as an actor like I have playing her. Like, she literally felt like she possessed me. The audition was 4 pages of sides. They were really funny and incredibly written, obviously, but it wasn't insanely descriptive. I didn't get a ton of information. And I did 1 take of my audition scene. Wow. And that was it.
I love reading in this book some of the behind the scenes machinations of the industry. And you talk about, for instance, the test offer, which I thought was so fascinating. And, you know, for the listeners, it's basically a situation where you have to negotiate the terms of a contract before you're actually officially offered the role. So you're kind of getting this glimpse into your future lifestyle and schedule and how much money you're going to make and maybe how famous you are. And they're all based on circumstances that might not actually even materialize. And you talk about the joy and the relief that you got when you finally got this role and you were finally offered this role on Absolutely Fabulous, which is something that you really wanted. And then it never got picked up after the pilot. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you deal with that as an actor? I mean, do you build up like emotional calluses to kind of protect yourself from that disappointment? I mean, has that changed now compared to back then for you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I used to go to auditions that I really wanted and like basically have a however many hours, day long panic attack until I heard whether or not I got it, because I was so consumed with desire and anticipation and fear. And there's so much heartbreak. And you also learn that like there's no sure bet in this industry. Like you can be in a movie or a television show that everyone thinks is going to be the next biggest hit that's ever existed and, you know, win you an Oscar or an Emmy and beyond for 8 seasons. And then like the studio head gets fired and the guy that replaces him decides he wants to make his mark and put an entirely new slate on the thing, and the movie never comes out and the TV show gets shelved, and or like it just doesn't land in the way it was supposed to, or something happens in the world that influences how people are consuming, like who knows. And vice versa. You can make something that you're like, no one will ever see this, or I think this is trash, and for whatever reason it just hits really hard. And
there's just so many factors that are outside of your control.
There's so many factors.
And I love that story of, you know, and sometimes I guess those factors can work in your favor too. Like you threw up at a table reading for girls.
Well, I didn't throw up. I thought I threw.
So in the end, you didn't. You did not.
I didn't throw up, but I was in a full NyQuil-induced standing coma, basically. Yeah.
And you got the part nonetheless.
I did. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. But yes, you for sure do develop emotional calluses. I mean, and at this point, I think you just learn to like hedge your hopes. I'm like, I will get excited when I'm on set shooting. I've gotten jobs before that the contract is signed, everything's happened, and like something falls through and it never comes to fruition.
So has your mindset and your excitement, I assume, has been very tempered after you leave an audition today as opposed to 15 years ago?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
So, in this book, you're very candid about your struggles with anorexia and body image and your fixation with this concept of weighing 100 pounds. But in your last book, My First Popsicle, it's an anthology of essays that you edited, and it's entirely about food and the comforting nostalgia that people associate with their favorite childhood meals. And it seemed like those two themes were kind of at odds with each other. I mean, is there a contradiction there? Like, what's the through line between those two projects?
I mean, the real impetus to do Popsicle was honestly, friends of ours showed us a video of their son having his first ever popsicle. And it was like one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And Evan and I were talking about it after dinner and just talking about how people's emotional connection to food is something that's entirely universal, whether it's a childhood memory, whether it's a good memory or a bad memory, it's something familial, it's something generational, it's something cultural, that everyone has some sort of a potent story where emotion connects to food. And I just thought it would be interesting to give people the sort of ambiguous prompt of, that's literally what I told people. I didn't mandate it to childhood memories. I said, I want you to write an essay about food and feelings. And I think the connection to me for that, if you look at it next to the essays I write about body image and anorexia in this book, is it's hard, I think, for people to understand who haven't experienced it. But like, for the most part, eating disorders are not about food. The control over food and your weight are a symptom of a bigger issue, which is like obviously a feeling of lack of control and a desire to do that. Sort of like the anxiety flea I was talking about earlier. Like my anxiety flea found controlling what I put in my body as a place to land to try and make me feel safe in a world where I felt like I couldn't control anything around me. And so that's much more about an emotional connection to food than it is about the actual aesthetic connection.
Well, I mean, just despite your kind of complicated relationship with food, do you have very positive food associations that are kind of siloed? I mean, do you have great memories of your first popsicle?
I don't remember my first popsicle.
Metaphorically, like.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have memories from when I'm a child about like, and just memories throughout my life of like certain meals, certain dishes, certain experiences that I've had. Absolutely. Yeah.
So in the epilogue of this book, you describe this metaphor of feeling like there's a hole in your piggy bank.
Mm-hmm.
And, no matter how many successes or accomplishments or friendships you collect, the tokens, they fall out the back and you're ultimately left unfulfilled. And, there's a section in this book where you get to meet one of your heroes, David Sedaris. And, I'm a big fan of his as well. And, I found some of the phrasing and observations in your book really reminded me of him. And, you tell these fantastic stories about smoking a crack-laced joint in Malibu by accident, or, Axl Rose stealing your coat, or this encounter with a fake tampon machine. And there was one line that in your book that really, it made me laugh out loud. And you wrote, it was jarring to watch. It was like watching the Queen do a keg stand or seeing a swan have diarrhea. That is such a sharp, hilarious description. And it's absolutely on par with something that David Sedaris would write. So for whatever my humble opinion is worth, consider that a token in your bank. And, bravo on this book.
Oh my God, Justin, thank you. It's like, you're making me cry. That's like one of the nicest things everyone has ever said.
I mean it. I really enjoyed it. So, you should be really proud of this.
Thank you.
Well, we'll end on a high note.
Okay.
We always like to end the podcast by asking the guests to plug something that they're not directly involved in.
Ooh.
That they feel isn't getting enough attention. Could be a book, a movie, an artist, a TV show, a cause. Is there something that you're really feeling lately that you want to give a little extra inspiration to?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Oh, I got to think about that. I mean, poor Oasis, right? They really need some help right now.
Yeah, I hope they're going to be able to financially take care of themselves.
They might have to cancel the rest of the tour. Poor guys. I really feel for them. If you haven't heard of them, they're great. Oh my God. Oh my God. You know what's one? Actually, not new. Also binged like immediately. Not immediately. I binged it like I was in Italy shooting this show, but I only worked like 3 days over 2 weeks, and the town was shut down while I was there because it's August in Europe and literally all the stores were closed. And it was also like 110 degrees every day. So basically I was just like relegated to my hotel room. And my husband had just watched, and I was like, oh, I never watched that show, Sneaky Pete. Oh my God. It's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. It's Giovanni Ribisi and Bryan Cranston's is he in the second season? I think so. He's definitely in the first season. Margot Martindale, Marin Ireland. The cast is across the board incredible. It's about this con man, and the writing is so good. The show is so good. It is like one of my favorite TV shows.
Good.
Fucking amazing.
All right. I'm going to check it out.
So good. Sneaky Pete. Okay, wait. Also, they're back on tour right now for the first time in apparently 17 years. I don't really think they need any help from me, but I've mentioned to a couple people that I'm like, do you know Rilo Kiley? And everyone thought I was saying Riley Keough. And someone the other night was like, she's on tour with Daisy Jones and the Six. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Anyways, Rilo Kiley, which like basically was high school for me. One of my favorite bands of all time. Jenny Lewis is the coolest woman that's ever lived. They're touring, and I just went to see them. And they're playing. I'm going to go try and see them in LA at the Greek in October.
Those are great recommendations.
Sneaky Pete and Rilo Kiley.
Awesome.
Go get it.
Well, I just want to give you one more congratulations on the book. Definitely go and check it out. And you want to say the name and title? You want to do your own plug? Or I'm going to do it.
No, you can do it.
Okay. Check out Zosia Mamet's new book. It's called Does This Make Me Funny? And it's really worth a read. And, it's light. You can read it in a weekend. It's not heavy, but there's a lot of heart, and there's just a lot of soul in it. It's a great read. So congrats.
Thank you, Justin.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. That was so fun,
good.
dude.
Oh, I'm glad we finally got that done.
Those are some good questions.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug contains original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Mixing and sound design by Matt Boynton at Ultraviolet Audio, logo and branding by Italic at italic-studio.com, and you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the archive and tune in for future conversations.